Welcome. This video is documenting the prediction that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will fall and injure his head on July 26th and then go into a vegetative state until November 23rd, 2028, Thanksgiving Day. The post date of this video proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this time-stamped email, which, as we can see here, it was July 22nd that this email was composed, this date. The information in this email was learned long before July 22nd, but I ended up compiling it into an email on July 22nd, which predates the prediction for Paul Simon on July 26th, as does the post date the video is posted. Furthermore, this isn't the only video making this prediction for Paul Simon on July 26th. Many videos were posted prior to July 26th on various other dates. Okay, if you're skeptical for some reason, please email me and I'll forward this to you. And this video is also explaining how the signs indicate that the rapture will be on the true Pentecost on May 27th, 2029. This is an amazing video as it will explain the very big culture war story of Terry Schiavo, the most famous vegetative state person. If you are from outside of the US and you are not familiar, Terry Schiavo was in a vegetative state for, I think it was 15 years. It'll be spoken about in this video, and I think it was because, in fact, the 15 is also relevant to Paul Simon because his recent album 7 Psalms is his 15th solo album. But anyway, I'm really jumping ahead there. So if you are in the US and you are old enough, you will recall this was a really big story in the day, and it was, I guess, at that time closer to the beginning of the climax of the culture war between the two camps of the baby boomer generation. And the war was over what to do about Terry Schiavo. Her parents wanted to keep her alive. Her husband didn't, and claimed that she would want to not remain in this vegetative state either. So anyway, there's lots more than just Terry Schiavo in this video. This video is profound in many, many ways, and it isn't just about Terry Schiavo. But what I'm saying here is that what is relevant is that when it was first recognized that Paul Simon would likely go into a coma and a vegetative state, it came to my mind, what about Terry Schiavo? And did God use Terry Schiavo to confirm this? And he most certainly did. It is truly astounding. So, this video will explain the reasons for how this prediction is known ahead of time, which will prove that this prediction is from the righteous Christian God of the Bible. If you are of the worldview that you would call New Age or collective consciousness, etc., new spirituality, know that I know far more than you how this prediction is known ahead of time. It's absurd to even think otherwise, to even contemplate it otherwise. But no, you do not know, and it doesn't fit your worldview. In fact, how I know the prediction ahead of time disproves your worldview. And that's the point. This prediction did not come through supposedly, as you will say, to try to fit it into your worldview. Somehow supposedly tapping into the collective consciousness, etc. This prediction is known through studying the righteous Christian God of the Bible's prophetic signs that Jesus commanded his disciples to watch for. These predictions relate to the Bible, specific passages in the Bible, etc. Revelation 19:10 in the Bible tells us that the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. The disciples knew that Jesus was the Messiah through his fulfillment of prophecy, primarily. And so this video, I'm going to read these notes. It's in note form. I don't have time to do a write-up or anything to that effect. The information will build on itself as the knowledge, or rather information, comes together to communicate what God is intending in this story he is telling, that will come to these profound climactic insights. Don't skip ahead because it won't be understood. You need to understand what's going on here. And God is telling these stories through his interconnected signs in order to communicate extremely important information and knowledge that everyone needs to know. The wise person, when this prediction comes to pass, will recognize that they need to watch every minute of every video on this channel. So let's begin. I don't know if we knew this already, but so these notes are also communication with a friend. I don't know if we already knew, but the 2026 World Cup is the 23rd World Cup. On June 25th, the USA is playing Turkey in the World Cup in Los Angeles. The Turkey earthquake occurred on February 26th, 2023, this prophetic earthquake in Turkey. But it was, just to explain that a little bit, there were all sorts of aftershocks, etc., regarding this earthquake. And if we put them on a map, it clearly outlines a number 7, standing upright, north-south. It's a number 7 over the eastern half of Turkey. Turkey is the location of the 7 churches in the Bible, in the book of Revelation. Okay, so, and there's lots more to that Turkey earthquake, okay? But anyway, so on February 6th, 2023, and there was a 7.8 magnitude earthquake, followed by a 7.7. Okay. So June 25th is 3 years and 140 days after this. All right. Some of these notes are from my friend, and I didn't have time to really filter, through what I really want to put into the video and not. So a lot of this, some of it is just brainstorming. Some of it's just brainstorming, all right? It's not, it could have been left out of the final email here that I'm using for the video, okay? Don't know why, but Paris Hilton presented the game ball. Well, you'll see near the end of this video, this is extremely important. Paris Hilton presented the game ball at the beginning of the USA-Turkey match. So I guess what happened, because I can't watch the games here where I am because of it being not possible. But apparently it's like in baseball when a celebrity or a politician will go out onto the field and throw the symbolic ceremonial first pitch of the game. So this is what Paris Hilton did at this World Cup game between Turkey and the US in Los Angeles. She gave out or presented the game ball at the beginning. So it was like a ceremonial thing, okay? Now on June 25th, J.D. Vance visited this same day. J.D. Vance, the vice president, visited the Richard Nixon Presidential Library in Yorba Linda. He said the deep state took down Richard Nixon and that today the Watergate scandal would only be a 12-hour news story. He also called Diddy a Christian theologian as a joke. Okay, so it's just brainstorming. I should have gone through this and not included everything. Okay, so Diddy equals Didymus equals twin. So I don't know how relevant this is going to be to this particular video, but as you know, if you've watched the other videos, there's this massive theme of twins going on with this World Cup that included, for example, the twin earthquakes that were 39 seconds apart in Venezuela on Lionel Messi's 39th birthday. Anyway, so Lionel Richie's daughter, Nicole, and well, actually, speaking of this theme of twins, it comes into play with Paris Hilton because she's most known for the beginning of her celebrityness began with a duo, which is this theme of twins, with this woman, Nicole Richie, Lionel Richie's daughter. Okay, Lionel Richie's daughter is Nicole, and she is friends with Paris Hilton. Well, not only that, like I just said, they had this show, The Simple Life. Okay, and then they did another show in 2025, Encore. And it was released at the same time as the reopening of the cathedral in Paris, where they speak French, and encore is a French word. And the encore hints at the two earthquakes. It's like part of this theme of twins. It was like a second show to the Simple Life, and it involved the two women, Paris and Nicole. Okay, now, the reason why Lionel Richie's mentioned here is because in a prior email thread, we were talking about the Lionel Richie prophetic sign, which was when he was on stage at a performance in the 32nd state in St. Paul. He had to exit the stage because he was feeling dizzy. And that was 32 days before it is predicted that Paul Simon will fall and injure his head. And he was in the 32nd state in the city St. Paul. In fact, this was the first indicator on our radar of July 26th being the date for Paul Simon. It'd been known for quite a while that God was pointing overwhelmingly to July 26th, and then it was realized, well, it's for Paul Simon after this Lionel Richie sign in St. Paul in the 32nd state, 32 days before July 26th. Okay. Anyway, so the signs overlap. They cross over. The signs are interconnected. This is the thing, is that none of God's prophetic signs can be properly or fully understood without their context and connections with the other prophetic signs. Something that is missed. This concept is missed by the other quote-unquote watchers. And I quote-unquote because some of the quote-unquote watchers aren't actually watching. They consider watching to be looking for hidden secrets and codes in the Bible to extrapolate and maybe add them to one or two of the signs that they're aware of, like the Great American Eclipse or something to that effect, the few signs that they know of. They're not really watching. But regardless, it's through the interconnectedness of the signs that they can be properly understood. It's the same with the Bible. The Bible cannot be fully or properly understood without appreciating its interconnectedness. In fact, this is what makes it a supernatural document. Those that appreciate this are familiar with how this is with the Bible. One can take an infinite number of pathways through the Bible, and it's all interconnected, and it's clearly supernatural because of this. These books that were written centuries apart, etc. Well, it's the same with God's prophetic signs. And that's why also the vast majority of God's prophetic signs are completely missed and are only being talked about on this channel. For example, this Lionel Richie sign and Paris Hilton sign. Now, Paris and Nicole did the Simple Life, as I just said, and the Encore. This hints at the Encore part 2, if you will, as in theme of twins, for the two antichrists who will each have a part 2. Francis will be resurrected. It'll be a second Pope Francis. Not only that, he'll be cloned. That's also part 2 symbolism. And there'll be a second presidency for Barack Obama, the second of the 2 antichrists. This isn't the first instance of the word encore, in fact, referring to this either. There was the plane that crashed after flying over Washington, D.C. in June, I think, of 2023, that was owned by a company named Encore. But that's another story, and I'm not going to explain it. Well, it's related to Michelle Obama, who hugged the Queen of England, which was a faux pas. And she will return as the president and bring Barack Obama as her vice president. She will be the Queen of America. That's the encore there. It was a faux pas. Paul McCartney composed his song Michelle while in Paris, busking on the streets while hanging out with the hippies or the bohemians near the Paris River, which is why Michelle Obama was on the Paris River when the Notre Dame Cathedral was burning. And there's an iconic image of her sipping a wine glass on her chartered boat to promote her book Becoming, in which the reflection of the glass is the burning cathedral. She's drinking the burning cathedral, and her book Becoming hints at her becoming the Queen. And Paul McCartney, who was knighted by the Queen, composed Michelle and then sang the song to Michelle in the White House. But the point is that this connects us to the encore and the Queen symbolism too, which is also, by the way, why Princess Diana died at the Paris River. So I'm just really going off on an unnecessary tangent there. Sorry about that. It's not really related to this video in a way. Turkey, well, it is, because it's all infinite. The big picture of signs is infinite, and that is the tricky thing that makes explaining God's big picture of signs, which is only being explained on this channel, extremely difficult, is that when you try to explain any part of the web, you end up pulling the entire web. Turkey scored in the 98th minute, so that's just brainstorming. I don't know if there's a relevance to the 98th minute, but anyway, the score was 3-2. And again, there was the Lionel Richie sign on this day in the 32nd state, 32 days before Paul Simon. Okay, the USA and Paul Simon is predicted to die on Turkey Day, Thanksgiving, after being in a vegetative state. The USA-Turkey game in the 23rd World Cup on June 25th was 900 plus 900 plus 900 days after the prophetic plane crash in Yorba Linda on February 23rd, 2019. Okay. So first of all, the number 9 is the most important number in God's prophetic signs. It's from the Bible. It symbolizes God's judgment. 23 is the 9th prime number. God pairs 9 and 23 together to confirm the signs and connections, as the Antichrist Obama was inaugurated in 2009 and wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school. Again, God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. And so 900 plus 900 plus 900 was judgment. And so the way Barack Obama and Michelle Obama will return to the White House is through a plane crash. When the 2 running mates in the 2028 election die in a plane crash, and in an emergency, the Democrat Party nominates Michelle and Barack. Okay, so that's why the plane crash here on February 3rd, which ends at 23, in 2019. Which was the day of the Super Bowl, and the plane crash was in Los Angeles, and Los Angeles was in the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl was being played in the 6+6+6th state. It was the Los Angeles Rams versus the GOAT, greatest of all time, Tom Brady, which made it a Ram versus GOAT prophecy, which is Daniel chapter 8 in the Bible, which identifies the Antichrist, Pope Francis. Because it says this Antichrist in that chapter comes from the north and the west. Rome is exactly due northwest of Jerusalem. Now, I'm not going to explain that prophecy, but that prophecy is about a period of 2,300 days that is symbolic of the period of the Antichrist. And this date 2-3 was exactly 2,300 days. This goat versus ram prophecy Super Bowl on the date 2-3, which ends at 23, was exactly 2,300 days after the 23rd anniversary of the 1989 World Series earthquake. And on this 23rd anniversary, a huge fireball flew at low altitude over the Bay Area, and therefore pointed to the 1989 prophetic World Series earthquake. And again, the 23rd anniversary, it all points to Obama, who wore number 23, the goat Antichrist. So this is profound, because from that 23rd anniversary, in other words, World Series earthquake, 23 years, to the fireball over the Bay Area, because of course the World Series earthquake was throughout the Bay Area, and then 2,300 days from the 23rd anniversary to the date 2-3, which ends at 23, and the prophetic goat versus ram Super Bowl and the plane crash. And then from that day, it is 900 plus 900 plus 900 days to when J.D. Vance, part of God's trumpet, was in Yorba Linda, where that plane crashed. And that was the USA-Turkey game. Do you see how amazing this is? And it was the 23rd World Cup. This is an astounding paragraph that you are looking at right here. And then it's 32 days, which is the inverse of 23. And the name Obama is equal to 32 in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. So in this paragraph, I really could have connected it to Paul Simon, and should have. Also, the game was 3-2. But you see, the World Series earthquake connects to Paul Simon here. Hope that's clear. If it wasn't, just rewind it. It's very simple and straightforward, if you can just visualize it here. We've got a timeline that connects these signs, and this is how it works. This is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. There's lots more to this, of course. Richard Nixon was the president who appointed Gerald Ford, the only president to never have been elected vice president or president, which is how Barack Obama, no, it was through the 25th Amendment. That's the main point. And Barack Obama will become the president again through the 25th Amendment, because the 22nd Amendment restricts someone from being elected to the office more than twice. He won't be elected as president. He'll be riding as the vice president. If that's not the case, somehow Michelle Obama will have someone else as the VP, who will then later, after the election or something, step down, and Barack Obama will be the VP or something. But I don't think that's the way it'll be. I think Obama will run as the VP in the election, and the Supreme Court will approve it. Could be wrong, though. Maybe he'll step in later. Either way, he'll become the president again through the 25th Amendment, and Gerald Ford, Richard Nixon's vice president, was never elected vice president or president. Anyway, and this sign connects us with the vice president visiting Yorba Linda. These signs right here. Because again, the plane crash in Yorba Linda connects to J.D. Vance in Yorba Linda with exactly 900 plus 900 plus 900 days. That's just astounding. And again, that's all confirmed to be relevant because, again, God pairs 9 and 23 together to confirm the signs and connections. And this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And if we think about it, one simple way in which God would provide a second witness for us is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 9 and 23. And I know that these are the numbers because I have been studying his big picture of signs from morning until night for more than full-time hours for more than 8 years. In other words, yes, the building blocks of God's big picture of signs, his true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, the building blocks of the big picture of signs identifies the Antichrist. For those evangelicals that love to play the Antichrist guessing game, it's time to stop. And this is the purpose of the prediction. Make no mistake, I know far better than you or anyone the reason and purpose for this prediction and why God has given me a voice through this prediction. It is to prove these controversial things that I'm saying in this video. I hope I'm clear. I don't want to repeat it again. This is the purpose. These controversial things are over. Done. End of debate. It is time to stop playing the Antichrist guessing game. And I emphasize that in order to make it clear that this applies to all of the controversial things that I'll be saying in this video, not just this. There's no debate at all. It's time to stop. There comes a time, and God is using these predictions to bring that time. You had some fun playing the Antichrist guessing game. You weren't following the signs and you weren't following Bible prophecy. Fair enough. For those that know Bible prophecy, it is abundantly clear from Old Testament prophecy that a pope would be the first of the two antichrists. It's a shame that knowledge has been lost, because there wouldn't have been a Protestant Reformation had there not been this knowledge. But this was widely known in evangelical culture 50 years ago, but it's been lost conveniently for our time so that many people can be fooled. All right. So June 25th, 2026 is 110 weeks exactly before the predicted plane crash that I was just talking about, which will be the two running mates, Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom. They will be running mates in 2028, and they will die in a plane crash in St. Louis exactly 110 weeks after June 25th. The thing is that this is inclusive, which means you include the day of. If we don't include the day of, it gets us 110 weeks back to June 24th, which is the day of the Lionel Richie sign. So they all overlap. The 25th connects to the Turkey earthquake because of the game with Turkey, but the day before was the prophetic earthquakes in Venezuela, which points to America, but that's another subject. Because they occurred in Caracas, which is Carcass. Carcass is what is circled by eagles in Matthew 24, which was illustrated with the circling of U.S. warships around Caracas at the beginning of the year. Carcass, because it's all pointing to the carcass and the death, which is why there was so much death in the earthquakes. It's pointing to the upcoming death of U.S. military personnel when warships, eagles, will be sunk at sea in the Iran war on December 10th. Anyway, earthquakes in 110 is extremely relevant. That's my point here. Because Joshua led the Israelites around the walls of security of Jericho before they collapsed in God's judgment due to an earthquake. And modern archaeology proves this. These walls collapsed due to an earthquake. And in the Bible, Joshua died at the age of 110, which is why we have this 110 weeks connection from the earthquakes here. Now, Harris is the senator from California, and at the time of the prophetic plane crash in Yorba Linda, she was the senator from California, and she tweeted on that day her condolences, etc. Harrison Ford starred as himself in an Amazon commercial on that day in the Super Bowl, and it involved power outages around the world. Okay. Harrison Ford, the names of two presidents. But Harrison Ford, which points to Benjamin Harrison, who was the 23rd president which points to Barack Obama, who were number 23. President Cleveland, until Trump, was the only president to serve non-consecutive terms, just like Obama will serve non-consecutive terms. Anyway, Harrison Ford is also known for his career as an actor, playing these roles as a pilot. And the big coincidence being that his passion in life is aviation. He narrated, for example, the IMAX movie documentary, Age of Airplanes. But in his movies, from Blade Runner to Star Wars, when he flew the Millennium Falcon, to a movie named 6 Nights, 7 Days, or 7 Nights, 6 Days, or whatever, in which the plot of the movie is a plane crash, and his character's name is Harris. His character's name is Harris, and he actually flew the plane. It took him some convincing to let the producers let him fly the plane in the movie because of insurance reasons, but they let him, and it's actually him flying the plane in the movie. Okay. Kamala Harris was at the game today. Yes, so this is relevant. She was at the game in Los Angeles. Her flight, by the way, when she will crash, will be on her way back to Los Angeles. 110 weeks equals Joshua equals earthquake equals the Turkey earthquake, like I was saying. And Turkey played USA on this day, 110 weeks before her predicted crash. The Turkey earthquake swarm surrounding February 6th engendered a giant 7 over the map. In the book where Joshua led the Israelites, they blew 7 trumpets, and then the walls of security collapsed. Oh, and J.D. Vance hints at trumpets. Trump Pence, Mike Pence and Trump hinted at trumpets, as does Trump Vance. Trump Vance is a play on Trump Pence, which hints at trumpets. And it was 7 trumpets that were blown, and that's why on his inauguration day of Trump and Pence, trumpets, Trump was 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old. And his inauguration, when he was 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old, was on the year ending in 7, and it was 73 days, which hints at 3 sets of 7, because when the Israelites blew the 7 trumpets, it was part of a symbolic 3 sets of 7. They marched around the walls of Jericho once per day for 7 days, and then on the 7th day, they marched around 7 times and blew 7 trumpets. This was the 3 sets of 7. And that's why Trump was inaugurated in the year ending in 7, when he was 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old. 73 days is in 3 sets of 7, after he won the election by 77 electoral votes. And on election day, Netanyahu, the leader of Israel, as in Joshua, the leader of the Israelites, Netanyahu was in office, had been in office for 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days. And when Trump won by 77 electoral votes, it was exactly 73 weeks, which into 3 sets of 7, after he famously began his campaign symbolically when he descended the golden escalator in the Trumpet Tower. That day was exactly 188 months after the 7.0 earthquake in Joshua Tree, California. 188 because H188 in the Bible, in the concordance, I should say, is the word woe exclamation mark, used in the Bible in the context of extreme judgment from God. The trumpeting from the 7.0 earthquake, the 7 trumpets that were in the book of Joshua. Joshua Tree, California is where the earthquake was. And that's near Los Angeles, which is right near, which is where this game was played that Kamala Harris was at, etc. And J.D. Vance and Usha Vance were also in attendance, at the game, after he was at the Yorba Linda Library earlier in the day. Here we go. Harris and Newsom were at the I-10 together, which hints at 110. The I-10 highway, after it had burned and then was reopened after the repairs were done. It was a big news story at the time. And Harris and Newsom were both together for the reopening of that section of the I-10 highway on November 19th, 2023. That day is 2 years, 7 months, and 6 days to this game on June 25th, which is in turn 110 weeks to their predicted crash in St. Louis, the area code 314. Okay, now the Turkey earthquake was 3 years and 140 days before June 25th. So that's the thing. That's this confirmation here. Because we're talking about earthquake. That's why the I-10 here, it symbolizes Joshua and the earthquake at Jericho. And then Jericho burned, and the I-10 burned. Okay, we have this connection, which I'll explain right now, I guess. 2 years, 7 months, 6 days, because 276 in the Bible is symbolic of a shipwreck. And this is a plane crash that we're talking about. And then 110 weeks, Joshua, I-10, to the area code 314, predicted plane crash. But also, this day connects with this 314 number to the Turkey earthquakes. And again, Harris is at the Turkey-USA game here. 110 weeks before the predicted crash in the area code 314. Right? 3 years, 140 days, and then 110 weeks to the 314. But that 110 weeks is also confirmed because of this connection back to the I-10 with Harris and Newsom. And they will be together, predicted in a plane crash in the area code 314 in St. Louis when their flight from Washington, D.C., on their flight from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles. These two paragraphs here, or sentences in bold, are truly profound. Stunning. And the I-10 connection wasn't fulfilled really until now, until June 25th. Like, you get these prophetic signs from years ago, and you kind of fit them into the big picture like a puzzle. But like any puzzle, you're refitting pieces together, right? Some prophetic signs go on the shelf for a later time, and then get taken off the shelf again later when they fit properly, which is the case here with the Harrison-Newsom event at the I-10 after it burned. As I just explained, it connects with this shipwreck connection to the Turkey game. And the Turkey game connects to the Turkey earthquakes with this number 314. And then we have 110 weeks, as in the I-10, to the predicted crash in 314. It's amazing. Okay, this date in which Harris and Newsom were together on the I-10. Okay, it is 4 times 4 weeks and 4 days to March 14th, 2024, when Harris was in the 4 times 4 plus 4th state. So let me explain this. So 4 plus 4 is 8, times 4 is 32. So she was in Minnesota on March 14th, which gives us the date 314. We were already talking about 314, right? And its connection from the Harris-Newsom event on the I-10. But there's more to the story here. Because Kamala Harris was the first candidate for the White House to visit an abortion clinic. That's right. She had the nerve to visit an abortion clinic to champion abortion rights on March 14th, 2024. That's why she will die in the area code 314. Make no mistake, or vice versa. Well, there's a reason, bigger picture reason for 314 actually. But what I'm saying is that her death in the area code 314 will point to her visit on the date 314 to the abortion clinic as a candidate for the White House. Now, her death will lead to the return to the White House of the 44th president, which is why we have the 4 times 4 weeks and 4 days connection in the 4 times 4 plus 4th state. God repeats a number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. The irony of ironies is that the 44th president would never have been born had the first state to legalize abortions, Hawaii, made abortions legal prior to his birth. Abortions became legal in Hawaii in 1970, and he was born in 61. He wouldn't have been born. If you don't know the story, his mother, his 18-year-old mother, was knocked up by Frank Marshall Davis, the leader of the communist movement in Hawaii, for which his grandfather, Obama's grandfather, was assigned to monitor, his grandfather being an operative for the CIA, a CIA agent, whose cover story was a furniture salesman, but yet he was constantly relocating as a furniture salesman around the country. No, he was a CIA undercover guy. And that's how their paths crossed, Frank Marshall Davis and Obama's mother. They had the grandfather, fearing for his job, had to hide the pregnancy. Abortion wasn't legal anyway, but he needed a legitimate black father and not Frank Marshall Davis, so that he brought in Obama Sr., who was part of a CIA program bringing students from Kenya to counter the communists in Kenya, get them educated and acculturated to America and its values, etc. That was the thinking. That's what Obama Sr. was doing in America, and he wanted to stay for his doctorate, which he was allowed to do in return for agreeing to pretend to be the father. That was the agreement. Now, they did a really smart thing. Obama's mother and Obama Sr., they had the baby born in Kenya to make it look real for immigration. That's why both camps are correct. Those that say Obama's real father is Frank Marshall Davis, and those that say Obama was born in Kenya are both correct. And God gave me the wisdom to figure this out because I used to live in Hawaii as an illegal alien, and I almost went through, while I was in Hawaii, with an illegal, or rather a fake marriage back in the day. It took me to put the two together and realize both camps are correct because the evidence is overwhelming for both. And regardless, now these things aren't controversial once the prediction comes to pass. These things are now proven to be true. Like I said, I know far, far better than you or anyone the reason and purpose for these predictions and this prediction for Paul Simon. And it is to prove, case closed, zero debate on all of the controversial things that I am saying. Now let's move on. So we have this 11/19 date that hints at 9/11, 2 1s and a 9. That's why from this visit of Harris to the abortion clinic, it is exactly 119 weeks. And 119 weeks is also 110 weeks plus 9 weeks, which gives us 9/11. God uses the pairings of 110 and 9 for 9/11 because it was 110 floors that collapsed. The second plane had a crew of 9. Trump famously called into Channel 9 News and trumpeted how his tower at Wall Street had become the tallest tower in Lower Manhattan, etc. So, and then it's an exact 110 weeks from the June 25th signs like we were talking about to the predicted plane crash. So this is another way to connect it all. This is another timeline here. This one includes her visit on the date 314 to the abortion clinic. And it brings in Barack Obama, who would never have been born had the party that he leads legalized abortion. The unrighteous irony of ironies of all of history. Inappropriately so. God would do such a thing. God, if you think about it, would make the Antichrist someone who would never have been born had abortions been legal. I mean, that is something that he would obviously do when we think about it. It makes perfect sense. So this line should have been in bold as well. This is a truly beautiful thing you were looking at. I hope you realize and see this thing that you were looking at is this thing to marvel at that's from God. These connections here. Was Gavin Newsom at the game? Vice President Vance was at the Nixon Library because Nixon used the 25th Amendment to appoint Ford vice president. Ford was the only president never elected as president or vice president. Vance is equal to 41. Oh, sorry. He is 41 years old. 41 is the 13th prime number. Ford, the 40th vice president. That gives us another 314. Vance, vice president Ford gives us 314. Vance at the Turkey game was 3 years, 140 days after the Turkey earthquakes, 314. June 25th is 5 months, 6 days before January 19th, or after January 19th. And there was a 4.9 magnitude earthquake in Indio, California, near Joshua Tree Park. On June 24th, there was a 5.6 earthquake. June 25th is also the 37th prime number of days after the 4.9 earthquake in Joshua Tree on January 19th. That's 3 sets of 7, which again is relevant to Joshua in their symbolic 3 sets of 7 before the walls of security collapsed in judgment. And it was a 7 times 7. They marched around 7 times while blowing 7 trumpets. 7 times 7 is 49, which is hinted at with the 4.9 earthquake in Joshua Tree on this 9/11 date here. Nixon was the 37th president, 37th prime number of days. Amazing, amazing. The Nixon Library, 37th president, 37th prime number of days after this earthquake in Joshua Tree. Okay. Now, June 25th, 2026, California Governor Gavin Newsom, I'm quoting here, that's why it's in italics, took action on multiple major legislative and ballot initiatives ahead of a crucial deadline while officially rolling out a first-in-the-nation AI workforce tracking tool, artificial intelligence monitor, launching a first-in-the-nation online tracking tool to monitor, track, and detect the impacts of artificial intelligence on the workforce. Public safety funding announced $227 million in Proposition 64 grants to assist local communities with public safety and combating illicit cannabis activity. All right, 227 is a number that hints at 314. Not only is it the 49th prime number, and that hints at the 49th vice president, who is predicted to die in the area code 314, but the closest fraction approximating pi, which is 3.14, is 22/7, which is also what's hinted at with 227. This, in other words, is a big number regarding the 49th vice president's predicted plane crash. And that's why we have all of this vice president signs at this game that the 49th vice president attended, this World Cup. Why J.D. Vance was there, why he was at the Nixon Library, and why it connects to the 4.9 earthquake, etc. This VP symbolism story that I've been telling points to the 49th vice president. And now we have on the day with Newsom, who she's predicted to die with in the area code 314, this 227 number. So Harris was at the game. Gavin Newsom was busy with this $227 million proposal. And it's Proposition 64. 64 is 4 times 4 times 4. And God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. And again, the 44th president will become the president again as a result of this plane crash, which is the purpose of this plane crash, which is why the 64 and the 227 number here. June 25th is 119 weeks exactly after Kamala Harris visited the Planned Parenthood in Minneapolis on the date 314. As I mentioned, 119 weeks is 110 weeks plus 9 weeks. I didn't know that the swift quake was swift quakes, plural, twin earthquakes. June 24th and 25th are the midpoint dates from the Taylor Swift concert earthquakes that were nicknamed the Swift Quakes on July 22nd and July 23rd, because they were the dates of her 2 concerts in Seattle, which when the fans jumped up and down excitedly, triggered these earthquakes nicknamed the Swift Quakes. This isn't the first time God has done this. There was the prophetic football game in 2011 with the Beast Quake, which was the same thing, fans jumping up and down in Seattle at the stadium. Same stadium, I'm sure. It's called the Beast Quake. But anyway, that's another subject. The point is that this isn't the first time, and it's part of a pattern. So we have the Swift Quakes, part of the Beast Quake pattern. By the way, the beast, if you don't know, is a metaphor for the Antichrist in Bible prophecy, who is Obama. And Obama's chef was murdered by Obama on July 23rd, on 2023. Okay, and that date is, so the quakes, the Turkey game, which connects to the Turkey earthquake, and the earthquakes in Venezuela are the midpoint dates from the Swift quakes to the rapture on Pentecost on May 27th, 2029. That's an amazing thing. The rapture, or rather, the Israelites taking the promised land through the destruction of Jericho due to an earthquake, is symbolic of God's people taking the promised land, heaven, at the rapture, which is when God's faithful disappear. They will not die. They will go straight to heaven and rest for the final period of God's wrath on earth. So the Swift quakes and the rapture have a midpoint date, which is the earthquakes in Venezuela. This is a huge thing here. And furthermore, the Swift quakes were twin earthquakes, as were the quakes in Venezuela that were 39 seconds apart on Lionel Messi's 39th birthday. Lionel Messi plays for Argentina, which is where the first of the 2 Antichrists was born. So this is 1,068 days. If I recall correctly, from the Swift quakes, it is 1,068 days to the midpoint. 1,068 is the 888th composite number. This connects to the rapture, which is when Jesus comes for his faithful. The name Jesus in Greek is equal to 888 in Greek gematria. That's why. From these earthquakes, from June 24th and June 25th, the USA-Turkey game and all this is very important. We have this connection to the rapture using this number 888 because it's the 888th composite number, a number that's not a prime number. This is amazing, as I said. 168 days is also 35 months and 3 days, which is at G 353 in the Greek concordance, which is the word in the Bible to raise up, take up into heaven when Jesus ascended, for example, like the rapture. Nixon hints at Nix and Nicolaitan, the doctrine that Jesus said he hates and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth and those that teach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine. Now, on this same day was also the 8th win for Otani, which God is using to point to Obama, for Los Angeles, which hints at fallen angels. And this is the 888th composite number of days to the rapture. And he got his 8th win. And it was a news story too. Forget why, but it was his 8th win of the season. And then we connect with the 888. And the rapture is an escape from the Antichrist, which is why the connection. Now, Jalen Brunson for the New York Knicks on this day got the World Wrestling something title belt from a wrestler named Roman Reigns. As in the Antichrist reign, his reign, rule, the Antichrist is the Roman Pope Francis. Oh, and by the way, that's why the earthquakes were 39 seconds apart on Lionel Messi's 39th birthday, because 39 is 3 times 13, and Pope Francis was elected on the date 313 in the year 13. And also, Rome converted to Catholicism in the year 313 AD. But again, Lionel Messi, who was 3 times 13 years old on the day of the earthquakes 3 times 13 seconds apart, is from Argentina, where Pope Francis, the Roman, was born. Nicole Richie hints at the USS Cole, which was the prophetic sign with the shooter at the Trump at the White House press conference, or sorry, correspondence dinner. The shooter's name was, what was his name? Cole Allen? What was his name? Yes, it was Cole Allen. The name? The USS Cole was bombed at the port of Aden. Cole Allen. Okay. I explained that in another story. That's another story anyway. So anyway, moving on. It's relevant to Paul Simon because Paul Simon is symbolic of ships. And why is that? Well, in his song American Tune, he sings about the Apollo 11 spaceship and the Mayflower, the ship that was the spiritual founding of America. And he sang that song on Jimmy Carter's inauguration ball on the date 119, 9/11. Paul Simon is predicted to slip and fall and injure his head exactly 90 months and 11 days after his prophetic dream, in which a voice instructed him to make the album 7 Psalms and name it 7 Psalms. Revelation 9:11 is symbolic of the coming demonic possession of people who have taken the mark of the Antichrist, and it'll be through people's brains, through frequencies, which is what music is, that will trigger the components that self-assemble into people's brains and then engender delta brainwaves, which will facilitate demonic possession. Paul Simon famously dated Shelley Duvall and famously broke up with her at the airport as in portal through which the demons cross over from the demonic realm, as described in the book of Revelation, symbolized by Revelation 9:11. She was broken up with before she took her flight to the UK to film the movie The Shining. The Shining, made by Francis, as in Pope Francis Ford Coppola, is about demonic possession. And Paul Simon sang about Apollo 11 on the date 119, which is at Revelation 9:11. He sang about Apollo 11 9 days, as in Revelation 9:11, before Stephen King, as in King Apollyon in Revelation 9:11, who rises from the bottomless pit, released his book, The Shining. Paul Simon's best-selling album, Graceland, and the song Graceland opens with the famous lyric at the beginning, the Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar. Mississippi is the 9 plus 11th state. Delta brainwaves. Shining, the movie The Shining, demonic possession. The Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar. The song Graceland is about the king's mansion, the king of rock, as in King Apollyon. In the area of Little Egypt of America, in Memphis, named after Memphis, Egypt. And in the Bible, the king of Egypt is symbolic or a type for the Antichrist. Tennessee is the 4 times 4th state. The 44th president is the Antichrist. The American Pharaoh. The American Pharaoh horse was the first Triple Crown winner in 444 months, as in the 44th president, American Pharaoh. Four times 4 weeks and 4 days. So this must be, This is Paul Simon's, this is July 26th, okay? These are the signs, the connections for Paul Simon. July 26th will be 4 weeks and 4 days after the first day of the 4th month, in which 4 astronauts launched to do a ring around the pink moon. It was on the day of the full moon, which was the pink moon. And that was also the day that Paul McCartney sang at the 4-story ring campus for Apple Inc. And Paul McCartney and the Beatles founded Apple Corps. Or maybe I got the two mixed up. And anyway, that day was 4 plus 4th prime number of days after the auction of lot number 4 of the Black Strat guitar, Pink Floyd, Pink Moon, which was used in the recording of The Dark Side of the Moon. The astronauts were the first to witness the dark side of the moon. And in the same auction, Ringo, as in Ring Around the Moon, Ringo's Pinky Ring was auctioned. The whole collection was owned by the former owner of the team that won the Super Bowl, in which the GOAT of kicking, number 4, won his 4th Super Bowl. All right. GOAT Antichrist, 44th president. 32 days after Lionel Richie and his dizziness and episode in the 32nd state in St. Paul will be when Paul Simon is predicted to fall and hit his head. Now, the news article says that at the time he was singing Dancing on the Ceiling, and he was also performing in a concert with Earth, Wind, and Fire, and the drummer said that he had suffered dehydration, which equals water. That's relevant for something else, which I won't get into here. Now, July 26th will be 2 times 17 days after Clive Davis died, and he was instrumental in making Bridge Over Troubled Water the success that it was. That's the background to Bridge Over Troubled Water. And Lionel Richie was about the dehydration, which is water. That's why that's relevant. And it was Earth, Wind, and Fire. Well, what's the other element that's missing? Water. Now, Bridge Over Troubled Water is flood, as in Noah's flood symbolism. On the day that Clive Davis died, the news story regarding Liam Payne, the singer from One Direction, was about the inheritance to his son. And he died from a fall in Buenos Aires, where the Pope was born, the Antichrist. This was during the time of the World Cup and Lionel Messi from Argentina, where the Antichrist was born. The story about Liam Payne traces back to the formation of the group One Direction, in which the members were contestants on the reality TV show, talent show X Factor, that was hosted by famous Simon Cowell, as in Paul Simon. The son was had with the wife who Liam met on the show X Factor. All right. Now, Pope Francis will be resurrected and will become the 268th Pope. July 26th will be 268 days after October 31st, 2025. That was the day that Trump trumpeted how he had restored or renovated the Lincoln bathroom. Lincoln is the 4x4th president. This hinted at Elvis, who hit his head in a bathroom in his mansion, which is why he died later in his mansion 10 years after. A lot of people don't know this. Elvis didn't die from drugs. He was taking the drugs to combat the side effects from his head injury. On the same day that Trump trumpeted about the 4x4th president bathroom, he gave his first interview with CBS since his $4x4 million lawsuit. And he gave that interview in his mansion in Florida, the 9 plus 9 plus 9th state. God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. The 44th president was inaugurated in 2009. By the way, this 268 days connection is also 8 months and 26 days, and that's the date that the album Graceland was released on. 8 plus 2 plus 6 equals 4 times 4. And again, that connected us to the 4x4th president bathroom. Now, October 21st or 31st, and the 4x4th president bathroom and the $4x4 million lawsuit sign and the mansions was 9 months and 11 days after Trump's inauguration. And the prophetic sign was the winner of the 4th American Idol, which is the same thing as X Factor, had a sound of silence because the power cut out when she was singing America the Great. And that was the first indoor inauguration in 44 years exactly, with the inauguration of the 40th president. Anyway, from the October 31st, Halloween, 4x4th president bathroom, and a $4x4 million mansion sign, signs plural, to the inauguration is 9 months and 11 days. And then from the inauguration back, from the Sound of Silence, and Paul Simon's song that launched his career was Sound of Silence, from the Trump returning to the White House mansion sign with the Sound of Silence sign with the 4th winner of the American Idol, it's another 9 months and 11 days to the day that Paul Simon performed at the White House for a state dinner with the president and the prime minister of Japan, in which he performed Graceland about the mansion, the king's mansion. The King Elvis who hit his head in the bathroom. Paul Simon will hit his head on July 26th. And here you have, my friends, this amazing paragraph right here, this timeline from Paul Simon singing in the White House about Graceland and Elvis who hit his head and died. It's astounding. It's so profound, right? No human being is creative enough to concoct these things in their own mind. This is clearly from God. And along the way, God told a number of things, didn't he? He identified, for one thing, the 2 antichrists. But he also identified what's coming with the mark of the Antichrist and demonic possession through delta brainwaves through their brains, which is why Paul Simon will hit his head. Amazing. By the way, if I didn't state it, the post date of this email, as you can see, was composed on July 22nd. The date of I'll put this at the beginning again, and of course the post date proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time. Now, we didn't get around to producing this particular video until the day before, July 26th. But as you can see, the email, the timestamp proves that it was all this information was known ahead of time. This email, the information in this email was learned long before July 22nd even. Okay. All right. August 7th, 2025 was the day that the slide busted on the ship. Another reason why Paul Simon is associated with ships is because ships in Bible prophecy in the book of Revelation symbolize America, the destruction of ships. Okay, I've explained it a number of times already, and this destruction of ships follows the sound of silence that's heard in heaven. So Paul Simon, on August 7th, 2025, was this prophetic sign involving the busted water slide on ship. And Paul Simon's big hit was Slip, Slide, and Away. It's from his fourth solo album. The fourth album with Garfunkel is the Bookends album that contains the song America. Paul Simon performed 4 days after 9/11 in the first live broadcast of Saturday Night Live after 9/11. 9/11, in other words, is associated with Paul Simon. He cold opened the broadcast with the song The Boxer, which is about hitting your opponent in the head. Paul Simon is predicted to hit his head. The towers were hit, though, on 9/11, and Paul Simon is symbolic of 9/11. He's from New York City, but the broadcast after 9/11 makes him associated with 9/11. He also performed at the 10-year anniversary at Ground Zero. But that was 4 days after 9/11, and the fourth album with Garfunkel has the song America. The album Bookends. The fourth solo album has the song Slip, Slide, and Away. And here is the big thing. The big thing. When Paul Simon slips and falls, slips, sliding away, and hits his head and goes into a vegetative state, which will symbolize the sound of silence heard in heaven in the book of Revelation that precedes the 7 trumpets of judgment, which is why his recent album is 7 Psalms. When Paul Simon hits his head and goes into a vegetative state, it will be the slip, sliding away bookend to the opportunity that America was given with the warning on 9/11 to repent and turn back to God. It will be the bookend to this period of time for the opportunity to repent and turn back to God, which will then have been slidden away. America's opportunity to repent and turn back to God will have slidden away. It'll be the bookend to the opportunity. The fourth album with Garfunkel, America, bookends, and a fourth solo album, Slip, Slide, and Away, which is why Simon sang 4 days after 9/11. And why you have all these 4s that I'm talking about. Also, speaking of the 4s and Simon, his first album with Garfunkel, Wednesday morning, 3 a.m., Wednesday is the 4th day of the week, Simon received his prophetic dream in which a voice instructed him to make the album 7 Psalms and to name it 7 Psalms, was on the date 1/15, January 15th, 2019. That date, 1/15, hints at Amos 1:15. Amos chapter 1 with 15 verses, in which there is a repeating idiom. But before that, Amos is why Paul Simon and Garfunkel were first signed by Famous Amos, the founder of Famous Amos Cookies. He was the first agent to sign them, and he lured them into his office with a box of cookies. So, in other words, the famous prophet Amos, chapter 1 with 15 verses, has this repeating idiom for 3 transgressions and for 4. A Hebrew idiom that means the tolerable limit of transgressions has been reached. It's overflowing with the 4 over the 3. And now judgment. For 3 transgressions and for 4. Now is the judgment. No more is the opportunity to repent. Now is the judgment. As in the 4th solo album, Slip Sliding Away, which gives us the opportunity that America had to repent after the warning that is now slidden away. The bookend demonstrated by God. The time is up with the fall of Paul Simon and hitting of his head and him going into a vegetative state, which points to sound of silence that precedes in prophecy the judgments, which includes the destruction of ships, which symbolize America. Which is why we have this ship sign with this busted water slide. It was 7 days before another Paul Simon sign involving a ship. This was when the man walked off the pier of the same Royal Caribbean as in the King, right? Both of these ships were Royal Caribbean cruise ships. 7 days warning in the flood. God gave Noah 7 days warning. Both of these ships are flood signs. The water was pouring out of the water slide. The next one was a flood sign too, because the man, while he was filming the new Royal Caribbean ship, wasn't paying attention, and he walked right off the pier into the water and had to be rescued by a jet ski or a boat, if you will, like in Noah's flood in the ark. But he was filming the ship. He was taking pictures, in other words, which hints at Paul Simon because of his famous song Kodachrome, which is about his love of photography. It's amazing. And by the way, all these things are proven with myriad other connections, right? Like I said, it's an interconnected web, and when you try to explain one part of the web, you end up pulling the entire web, but I'm not going to do that. Because I explained that, because these dates, by the way, are in 2025. I explained this stuff and all the myriad connections back in the videos that I made in 2025 regarding all of this. Now, speaking of this flood symbolism, the date of the flood in the Bible account was the 17th day of the 2nd month, which is why from this date of the man falling off the ship into the water while filming the ship, which hinted at Comachrome and Paul Simon, it's 2 months and 17 days. And 9/11 is 2/17 also, because the 2 towers were struck 17 minutes apart, and Paul Simon is associated or symbolizes 9/11. So from this Paul Simon ship sign here, we have 2 months and 17 days to the bathroom, the trumpet bathroom stuff on October 31st. The 4x4th president's Lincoln bathroom and Trump's first interview since the $4x4 million lawsuit with CBS. And by the way, the White House mansion has 44 plus 44 plus 44 rooms. Elvis's mansion is in the 4x4th state. Elvis hit his head in the bathroom. And again, this date, October 31st, is 268 days to the date it's predicted that Paul Simon will slip and fall and hit his head. And that hints at the 268th Pope, the Antichrist. But it's also 8 months and 26 days. And that's the date that his album Graceland was released. And 2 plus 6 plus 8 equals 16 equals 4 times 4. July 26th, Paul Simon's predicted fall will be 5 times 5 times 5 days, which is also exactly 6 plus 6 plus 6 weeks after Trump was at Graceland. Trump visited Graceland. You'd figure that the date that Trump was at Graceland would connect to the date that Paul Simon will slip and fall and hit his head. And it does. Again, Graceland is about the king's mansion, which hints at the king of Egypt, because Memphis is in Little Egypt. The king of Egypt is a type for the Antichrist, whose number is 666, which is why we have exactly 6 plus 6 plus 6 weeks from when Trump visited the Graceland and the king's mansion. It's also 5 times 5 times 5 days, which is 15. Well, no, never mind. But Graceland, and in the song Graceland, Simon is describing his journey down the highway, which would have been from the 6 plus 6 plus 6 state, Louisiana. He would have began his journey in New Orleans, and he's driving to Graceland on the I-55. The description of the demonic possession of people who take the mark of the Antichrist through delta brainwaves is described in the 5th trumpet and will likely involve 5G frequencies. The 5th trumpet judgment that follows the sound of silence, as in Sound of Silence, song by Paul Simon, which will be symbolized with his vegetative state beginning on July 26th. Again, the Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar, which I already explained. But again, he sang American Tune about the Apollo 11 on the date 119, as in 9/11. He sang about Apollo 11 9 days before Stephen King, as in the King of Rock, released the book The Shining. And he dated Shelley Duvall, who he broke up with at the airport before she went to film the movie The Shining, which is about demonic possession. That's what The Shining is in that movie. Paul Simon has a tour this summer. It seems the last date, July 18th, in Ravinia Highland Park, Illinois, the 9 plus 11th state. It's 4 plus 4 days before July 26th. July 26th is 44 days after Paul Simon's performance in Morrison, Colorado, on the day that Disclosure Day was released, which gives us DD, the 4th letter, as in 44. Aliens are related to the Antichrist because aliens are demons pretending to be aliens. Oh, and Colorado is the 4 corners state with 4 corners, which confirms the 44 days and the connection to the movie Disclosure Day. The 4 corners state with 4 corners. Oh, Morrison, because of the song, Jim Morrison, the leader of the Doors. And again, Door is the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which is the same symbolism as a bridge, which is why Simon's bridge over troubled water. It's this bridge that's in the prophecy. The door is opened to the bottomless pit, and the demons cross over from the demonic realm over the bridge into the earthly realm and pretend to be aliens. So Jim Morrison is why this connection to the Morrison 4th state, or 4 corner state with 4 corners. "44 days. Amazing, amazing. Now, Val Kilmer, speaking of Jim Morrison, Val Kilmer played Jim Morrison in the movie The Doors, and he died on April 1st, the first day of the 4th month, as in Door, 135 or 135th semi-prime number of days, 437 days, before June 12th, Disclosure Day, as in DD, 4-4, as in Morrison, 4 corner state with 4 corners, 44 days before Paul Simon's predicted fall. And again, Simon is about number 4, as I've now explained, because he sang 4 days after 9/11. And because of Wednesday morning, 3 a.m., which gives us for 3 transgressions and for 4. And the 4th album with Garfunkel and the 4th solo album, like I just explained, right? But now we've got all of this to the book of Revelation and the demonic possession from the bottomless pit opened with the door. We've got Val Kilmer connecting to this now. Oh, the reason for 135 is because of ships, which is associated with Paul Simon, as I've now explained. Before the war began with Iran, The news is saying that there were 135 ships that crossed through the Strait of Hormuz on a daily basis. There were 135 space shuttle missions, spaceships, which replaced the Apollo missions, and Paul Simon sang about Apollo 11. This is huge. And again, the destruction of ships in the prophecy follows the sound of silence, which is symbolized by Paul Simon and his vegetative state, predicted vegetative state. So that's why this 135th semi-prime number of days connection, which is profound. The 135 space shuttle missions, because the two shuttle disasters were almost exactly 17 years apart. In fact, they are commemorated on the same day every year because they are so close together in the calendar. They were 17 years apart, two of them, and on 9/11, which is what Paul Simon symbolizes, two planes struck the two towers 17 minutes apart. The two planes were 17 minutes apart, and the two shuttle disasters were 17 minutes apart, or 17 years apart, because it all points to Apollo 17. Apollo 11 was the first mission to the moon, man on the moon. Apollo 17 was the last American on the moon. The moon symbolizes Christ. It is a giant rock, and in the Bible, rock is symbolism for Jesus. The sun symbolizes God the Father, and the sun's light is too bright for us to gaze at, but we can gaze at the sun's light reflected off of the moon. And watching for the timing of the moon in the Bible is important and symbolic, and it's symbolic of the timing of the return of the Lord, including watching for his signs, including the moon signs. The last American to depart the moon was symbolic of America's departure from Christ. And that is why the two shuttle disasters, the spaceships, were 17 years apart, and the two planes were 17 minutes apart on 9/11, which Paul Simon symbolizes, which is why we have this connection involving the 135, which hints at ships, to the predicted fall of Paul Simon. Because ships are destroyed, which symbolize America, after the sound of silence. Why do the ships symbolize America? Okay, well, it's because of a parallel with Isaiah chapter 23. Revelation 8 is a parallel with Isaiah chapter 23 involving the ships of Tarshish. We have this prophecy of destruction for Tyre, and ancient Tyre is symbolic of America. There are those that say America isn't in Bible prophecy, but they aren't looking at it correctly. It couldn't be further from the truth, and that's exactly what we would expect, of course. Ancient Tyre is symbolic of America because it was protected by its natural sea, surrounded by ocean. It wasn't until Alexander the Great built a causeway over to the island, the city-state, to conquer it, that Tyre fell. Anyway, this description of ancient Tyre is in context of also this judgment on the ships of Tarshish. There's all kinds of evidence to point and indicate that Tarshish, which was referring to Great Britain. Great Britain became the empire on which the sun never set through its ships, through its merchant and navy ships, the ships of Tarshish. This description in prophecy includes the daughter of Tarshish. What nation has a daughter that you know of? I can only think of one, really. So for those that say Tarshish was Spain, whatever, no, it was Great Britain. Tarshish had a daughter. What daughter would that be referring to? It's the UK, and the UK culture birthed America. And this daughter of Tarshish also became the dominant power of the world through its ships, through its navy power, and its merchant ships, its trade. Okay, so, but to prove all this further, and I don't need to prove anything, because the prediction proves it. The prediction proves everything I'm saying, right? I hope I'm clear. I don't really need to make the case here. I could just say that the ships symbolize America, and that's be it. And it's now the truth. It's a fact once the prediction comes to pass. But we have Revelation 8 and a parallel, and like a lot of Revelation prophecy points back to Old Testament prophecy, in this case, Isaiah 23, 8 and 23. This was the date, 8/23, on which there was the earthquake in Washington, D.C., the capital of America, which did 2 times $17 million of damage to the National Cathedral. As in 9/11, 2 planes 17 minutes apart. The National Cathedral is also nicknamed America's spiritual home, which is God, which was why the judgment. It's also 34 million, and 34 is the 9th Fibonacci number, and the number 9 symbolizes God's judgment in the Bible and in God's signs. So anyway, that's just scratching the surface, right? Of why the ships symbolize America. So the case is closed now, all right? So Paul Simon precedes the sound of silence, is Revelation 8:1, and the ships are destroyed in Revelation 8:9. Which is incidentally why the heroes of the 88th floor, followed by trumpeting, calling into Channel 9 News on 9/11. Anyway, so Jimmy Carter is equal to 135 in simple English gematria. Jimmy Carter points to Iran, the Iranian hostage crisis, and Operation Eagle Claw, as I've explained in other videos, which points to the coming destruction of ships, the attempt to extract the hostages from Tehran, which was foiled by dust, hints at the coming mission to extract the nuclear dust, which will also be aborted after the destruction of America's ships. Just like the mission to rescue the hostages was aborted by Jimmy Carter, whose name equals 135 in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. The USA-Turkey game was 21 months after the indictment, exactly, of Mayor Adams over the Turkish embassy. That was the day after, or really hours after, because the performance of Paul Simon in New York City was the night before. Lionel Richie sign was 21 months exactly after Simon performed in New York City. Oh, and in the indictment, Mayor Adams' mansion was raided. It's the Gracie Mansion, which is at the Graceland Mansion. Now, 725 is the 153rd semi-prime number of months after the album Graceland was released. 153 is profound here. Because 153 fish were caught in the net in Jesus' last miracle, and it was caught in a boat, which is a ship symbolism. And the name Paul Simon hints at the 2 leaders of the fishers of men, Paul, the Apostle Paul, and Peter, whose name was Simon before he was renamed Peter. And also, Paul Simon famously married Carrie Fisher, as in fishers of men. So that's why this is an amazing connection here. Amazing. Now, July 25th was 22 months after the 110th Mayor Embassy Gracie Mansion. 2 times 110 floors, okay? We gotta speed it up here. Now, perhaps Simon falls on the 25th and the news is on the 26th. That could be what's going on here. Now, July 26th is exactly 115 months after Carrie Fisher died. That's amazing because, again, Paul Simon's dream to make his album, 7 Psalms, was on the date 115, which hints at Amos 1 with its 15 verses, etc. Okay? I recall that there is a reason why Simon's dream was on the date 115. Yes, Amos 1, 15 verses for 3 transgressions and for 4, the idiom that's repeated in that. Now, July 26th is 101 weeks and 5 days after the death of Wally Amos. That's amazing. That's a 115 for 3 transgressions and for 4 in the book of Amos. Wally Amos, famous Amos. This is amazing. This. I don't know why this isn't in bold. Okay, now Wally Amos, who signed Simon and Garfunkel before their first album Wednesday morning, 3 a.m., Wednesday the 4th day of the week, for 3 transgressions and for 4, which is in the book of Amos, the prophet. Good thing I already explained all of this earlier, so I don't need to explain it again here. So we have another hydration sign, okay, which is the water thing. Again, Lionel Richie had to step away because he was dehydrated. And then on 2 days later, we had another One Direction sign, another singer from the former band One Direction. We had Harry Styles. He fell on June 26th, 4 days after the Liam Payne story, and Payne fell to his death from the 3rd floor for 3 transgressions and for 4. He fell during this guy, Harry Styles. It's not the same as it was. That's symbolic of how God is saying to America, it's not the same as it was. Okay, because, again, America has turned away from God. America was founded with God. The spiritual founding of America, the Mayflower, which Paul Simon sang about in his song American Tune. It's not the same as it was, and now there needs to be judgment. Harry Styles is symbolic of the rapture because of his song, We Gotta Get Out of Here video, okay? Forget the name of that song, it's Bullets or something, but it's the famous chorus, we gotta get out of here, and then he's lifted up into the air, into the sky. It's like symbolic of the rapture. It's quite something. Now, rapture is one direction, up. That's the direction. The rapture is about a direction when the people go up into the clouds, as it's mentioned, and to be with the Lord forever. The Payne story about inheritance on June 22nd was exactly 153 weeks before the rapture, the inheritance of the kingdom. Styles choked on the water after he blew water into the air, as in the rapture, as part of this act known as his whale move. Okay, his first concert at Wembley, he had a series of concerts here on June 12th, which was the release of Disclosure Day, and the final date at Wembley will be July 4th, which symbolizes America. 3 times 4 concerts for 3 transgressions and for 4. His rapture video the song is called The Sign of the Times. Oh yes, that's amazing too, that it's about the rapture, and the song is called Sign of the Times. Styles is 32 years old. 32 equals Obama in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. Styles' residency at Wembley ends in July, 41 years after Live Aid, the famous concert in July of 1985 at Wembley. Okay? I'm just going to try to speed through this. Harry choked on water 2 years, 1 month, and 7 days, which is, again, it symbolizes the flood, which was on the 17th day of the 2nd month, before Harris's crash on August 2nd. Okay? Okay. Wembley hints at Wembanyama, Paul Simon, where he lives in Wembley. And Wembanyama, the player, plays for San Antonio, which is right near Wembley, Texas also. And God has overlapped Wembanyama signs with Paul Simon because of this. Okay. So Wimbledon is currently going on at the time of this Harry Styles sign at Wembley. Okay. Now, the fall of Styles, as in the fall of Paul Simon, of the band One Direction on June 26th at Wembley, plus 1 month exactly to Simon's predicted fall in Wimberley, Texas on July 26th. That's amazing. That's amazing. One Direction, 1 month. Wembley, Wimberley, musicians, okay. Styles equals the rapture, his song Sign of the Times. July 26th hints at G726 in the Greek concordance, which is the word rapture. And the sign flashed out its warning in the words that it was forming a lyric from The Sound of Silence. Okay, 41 years after Live Aid, like I just mentioned, Simon was born in the year 41. 41 is equal to key in simple English gematria, which is what opens the door to the bottomless pit when the demonic possession takes place, when the demons come out of the pit over the bridge, as in bridge over troubled water. Simon agreed to participate in Live Aid, but canceled right before. Simon sang on We Are the World, okay, with Lionel Richie, who composed We Are the World with Michael Jackson, and Harry Belafonte. Okay, Harry Belafonte also performed on We Are the World. And we're talking about Harry Styles, who fell on the stage at Wembley. Now, because of the water, as in Lionel Richie and his dehydration, etc. Okay, and the ships on the water, and Paul Simon being ships. Simon was 44 years old when We Are the World and Live Aid took place. June 26th was 4 + 4 days after the Obama Presidential Center dedication on June 18th, when Joe Biden appeared lost and showed signs of dementia, as in Paul Simon hitting his head, which symbolizes demonic possession. And through the mark of the Antichrist, which is what Joe Biden symbolizes, because the mark of the Antichrist was enforced by Joe Biden at the time, which is the VACCINE. It is the mark of the Antichrist in its current form. It does not need an additional technology to go with it, such as an additional something to go with it. Okay, anyway, 4 + 4 days because the 44th president. Presidential Library, amazing. Paul Simon performed Graceland for Joe Biden and the Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida on April 10th, 2024, which was the 666th composite number of days, in other words, 806 days, before the Japan earthquake, 6.9 earthquake, on June 24th, which was also the day of the twin earthquakes in Venezuela, etc., and also the day before the World Cup loss against Turkey. Yeah, that's amazing too. Because again, the performance of Graceland was about the king's mansion in Little Egypt. The king of Egypt is symbolic or type for the Antichrist, whose number in Bible prophecy is 666. Okay, and then the 6.9 is from the most important prophecy in the Bible regarding a 69-week period followed by a 70th week period that symbolizes the end times and the Antichrist. Now, June 4th will also, Martin Luther King Jr. was killed just north and west of the Graceland estate, and the King of Kings, or the King of the Jews, I should say, was crucified just north and west of the Temple Mount. And that was after the 69 weeks in the prophecy. Now, April 10th, 2024, 666th composite number of days to June 25th, the USA-Turkey game, which is 126 weeks exactly before Turkey Day, which is when Paul Simon is predicted to die, when they take him off the artificial nutrition and hydration. Okay, 126 weeks is also, though, the 153rd or 53rd prime number of days. Okay, and again, I'd explained how 153 hits at Paul Simon. I explained that a second ago. But 126 weeks, because also in Bible prophecy, the period that symbolizes the Antichrist is 1,260 days. I'm not sure why, but the June 25th Turkey game was exactly 21 months after the indictment of the Turkish embassy, of the mayor of New York City, the 110th mayor, as in the 110 floors that collapsed on 9/11 in New York, the 110th mayor, right, of the Turkish embassy, which led to the Gracie Mansion raid. 21 is equal to 11 plus 10, which hints at 110, and the 110th mayor. That 21 months is also equates to 91 weeks in one day. That's amazing. That confirms everything. 91 weeks in one day, which gives us 9/11. Now, which is where the mayor is, in Manhattan. 21 is the 7th semi-prime number. Graceland is Simon's 7th solo album. Also, Simon's recent album is 7 Psalms. So there you go. That's the other reason for the 21 months. Now, given the Gracie Mansion raid, this is probably it, right? Because the Graceland, 7th solo album. Gracie Mansion. Now, that's amazing. Okay, so 21 months, 7th semi-prime number of months, a number that is only divisible by 2 other prime numbers, to the fall of Paul Simon from the concert and in New York City, and then the indictment of the mayor of New York City that led to the raid of the Gracie Mansion. Okay, that's amazing. Graceland, 7th solo album. Now, July 26th is 7 times 4 months exactly after the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapsed. It symbolizes America. The bridge is named after the author of the national anthem, and of course, Bridge Over Troubled Water. And there's so much to this particular sign, but that's enough because it's a bridge, and we're talking about Paul Simon, who composed Bridge Over Troubled Water. Will Simon be in a prolonged coma? This is when it was just beginning to be understood that he will be in a prolonged coma. Do we have anything to support this? Well, Jimmy Carter was in a hospice for well over a year. That makes sense because Simon famously, and prophetically, I should say, performed at the inauguration ball for Jimmy Carter, okay, on the date 119, which is at 9/11, and demonic possession. I already explained all that. Harry Styles choked on water, okay? Edie Brickell, Simon's wife, has one hit song, and the chorus is, "Choke me in the shallow water." Harry Styles choked on the water in Wembley, and Simon's predicted to fall next to his wife or whatever in Wimberley. Amazing. Okay. Harry Styles choked on the water, right? July 26th is 9 months and 11 days after Ace Frehley died after falling and hitting his head. He's the singer or the band member of the band Kiss, and that's prophetic, but I won't get into it here. The car that crashed into the customs at the Rainbow Bridge was on its way to a Kiss concert, and that's just part of another story, though. But it's related to Paul Simon, obviously, here. Again, because Paul Simon is associated with 9/11. And it's about this guy who hit his head, the member of Kiss, okay? And Paul Simon's predicted to hit his head on July 26th. This is amazing. Okay. Now, and by the way, that bridge cost $4 million. And again, bridge equals door, which equals the fourth letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which is the symbol for the door. And Paul Simon performed 4 days after 9/11, like I explained. Now, April 25th, 2026 is the day that Mr. Irrelevant was selected in the NFL draft. He is number 257, okay? And this was the day that the 31-year-old Cole Allen from California, the 31st state, CA, first letter, 31, as in 31-year-old, as in USS Cole, that was bombed at the port of Aden, as in Cole Allen, okay? And then 3 months and 1 day later, we had all the 3 ones that I just explained, right? That's why it's 3 months and 1 day later to Simon's predicted fall. And he's symbolic of ships. And then it's from the day of Paul Simon's fall, it's the 257th super semi-prime number of days to the date he's predicted to die on Thanksgiving Day, which is why Turkey in the World Cup, by the way, and the Turkish embassy with the indictment for the mayor of New York City. And that's why we have the 257th super semi-prime number of days from the 257th selected Mr. Irrelevant. Mr. Irrelevant is pointing to Obama, who people think is irrelevant right now and can't be the president again. He's Mr. Irrelevant in politics, but he certainly isn't. He is the Antichrist. Mr. Irrelevant is equal to Simon in a 257-day coma. 257th super semi-prime number of days. All right. Let me know what you think of this. Okay, no. Do you recall this big national controversy? I'm talking about Terry Schiavo now. To my mind, this is the most famous coma case. It was a culture war. So this is when this was written here in this email. This was when it was first being realized that God is pointing to Terry Schiavo to confirm everything. This is amazing. This is the, assuming you are referring to Terry Schiavo, this is the AI talking to me, right? With my search. Assuming you are referring to Terry Schiavo, she was in a coma and subsequent persistent vegetative state for 15 years. She suffered a sudden oxygen-depriving cardiac arrest at her home in St. Petersburg, Florida on February 25th, 1990, at the age of 26. After briefly being comatose, she was diagnosed with irreversible brain damage and entered a vegetative state. her condition became the center of a landmark, highly publicized legal and ethical battle between her husband, Michael Schiavo, and her parents, Bob and Mary Schindler. The dispute ultimately centered on whether her feeding tube should be removed. Following several legal interventions and court orders, her feeding tube was removed, and she passed away on March 31st, 2005, at the age of 41. Okay, so 15 years. That's Paul Simon, because his 15th solo album is his recent album, 7 Psalms, which he had a dream to make, instructing him to make it. Paul Simon, okay, now she died at the age of 41. Simon was born in the year 41. And that's relevant because 41 is the equivalent of the word key that opens the door in the book of Revelation. Now, she died on March 31st, 2005, exactly 1,234 weeks before Paul Simon is predicted to die. And this hints at for 3 transgressions and for 4. Her coma began on February 25th, 1990, exactly 42 months after the release of Graceland on August 25th, 86. That's amazing beyond words, and that confirms everything. Because in Bible prophecy, a period of 42 months is mentioned 7 times as being symbolic of the period of the Antichrist, who again, a type for that is the king of Egypt, which is what the king's mansion in Graceland, Memphis, Egypt, Memphis, Tennessee, is hinting at. Furthermore, Elvis died at the age of 42. And it was a long time after his fall. Paul Simon's predicted to die a long time after his when he hits his head. Elvis hit his head, and he died at the age of 42. Terry Schiavo's coma began exactly 42 months after the release of Graceland. Amazing. Coma is symbolic of zombie pandemic, demonic possession. Now, wow, I think that confirms it actually. 42 months after Graceland, wow. Quiet Celebration Tour is the name of the tour for the 7 Psalms album, and that hints at Sound of Silence, which is what will be a coma. Paul Simon in a coma. Yes, true. Sound of Silence, Revelation 8:1. Would Brakil, his wife, and others be inclined to let Simon pass away on the symbolic day of Thanksgiving, as in being thankful for his life? If Simon were just in a vegetative state for a long time, would they choose Thanksgiving to symbolize being thankful for his life? It's weird to think about choosing a date for his death. The 42 months from August 25th, the release of Graceland, to the beginning of the coma for Terry Schiavo is also 1,280 days, which hints at G128 in the Greek concordance, which is the word the Egyptian. Okay, and Graceland is, it's the word for the Ethiopian. That's a mistake there. But the Ethiopian was the servant of the Queen of Egypt in the Bible. And Graceland is in Memphis, named after Egypt, and it's in the area Little Egypt, and this is symbolic of the king's palace in Egypt, the mansion. Now, it would be 113 days or 3 months and 22 days after the Newsom-Harris crash. Okay, that's Genesis 3:22, and that's all about the promise for the mark of the Antichrist that people will believe, which will be eternal life, which is symbolized by Genesis 3:22, but instead they'll become demonically possessed. Okay, now August 25th, the release of Graceland, Elvis injury 42, and he died when he was 42. 42 months to the sudden cardiac arrest and the fall of and the coma of Terry Schiavo, and in turn, this is 62 times 7 months. Okay, and there's a period of 62 times 7 in the most important prophecy in the book of Daniel in the Bible, and that gets us to April 25th, 2026, which was the sudden attack and fall of Cole Allen, 3-1. Cole Allen, CA, 31 years old, 31st state, and that's 3 months and 1 days to July 26th. So here we have the connection of, we had another one earlier, but from the release of Paul Simon's Graceland, we connect to Terry Schiavo and then connect to Paul Simon's fall, which confirms that Paul Simon will go into a coma and a vegetative state just like Terry Schiavo. Amazing. Now, July 26th, Paul Simon's predicted fall is 882 days before his predicted death. The name Terry Schiavo is equal to 882 in English gematria. Okay, but this is a correction. It's actually the day of the Turkey earthquakes, which is all about Paul Simon, as I've explained at length in this video, right? And to Turkey Day, the Turkey-US Day game, to Turkey Day is 882 days. And that's the equivalent of the name Terry Schiavo. Again, the Turkish embassy, Gracie Mansion, Graceland, Paul Simon. Turkey Day is when he's going to die. Paul Simon. Turkey Day symbolizes, Thanksgiving Day symbolizes America. It symbolizes the Pilgrims. Paul Simon sang about the Pilgrims and the Mayflower, and on and on. If God were to communicate Simon in a vegetative state for a prolonged period of time, this is exactly how he would do it, with the equivalent of the name of the most famous vegetative state case, Terry Schiavo. That's why this is so amazing. This confirms that this is all true. Paul Simon will be in a vegetative state until Turkey Day, Thanksgiving, 2028. Now, Paul Simon's monologue, from the Saturday Night Live. On Saturday Night Live, Paul Simon's associated with Saturday Night Live, if you didn't get it by now. Not only because of after 9/11, but he had a friendship with the producer of the show, and so he was on repeatedly throughout the years. Paul Simon wore an iconic giant turkey suit on Saturday Night Live for the show's Thanksgiving episode, which aired on November 20th, 1976. In the famous opening monologue, he begrudgingly sang his hit, Still Crazy After All These Years, while wearing the costume. By the way, that hints at demonic possession. Overwhelmed by how absurd and humiliating the heavy costume felt, Simon stopped the band halfway through the song and stormed off stage, complaining to Lorne Michaels, the producer. When he vented that the bit made him look like an idiot, Michaels calmly responded that he thought it worked great. The memorable, self-deprecating stunt was designed to poke fun at Simon's reputation for taking himself too seriously, and it remains one of the most celebrated holiday comedy sketches in the show's history. At the end of the bit, he has trouble fitting through the door because the turkey suit is too big. Amazing. He complains to Lorne Michaels, I can't fit through the door, quote unquote. Turkey equals key equals door equals Paul Simon, number 4, fourth letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The bridge, same as the door, like I've been saying in this video. Turkey, though, hints at it because it hints at key. And music is composed with music keys. And Paul Simon is known as the GOAT, greatest of all time of American music composers. So a turkey is slang for a foolish or incompetent person, someone who takes the mark of the Antichrist. Amazing. Since 2024, it seemed that God was pointing to Halloween and Thanksgiving for Simon. After October last year, I had assumed Simon was in the distant future on Thanksgiving 2028. Thank God you caught the Lionel Richie line, and we see that Simon is now, and it will be in a coma for a long time, till Thanksgiving 2028. So I've known, in other words, for a long time about Thanksgiving 2028 for Paul Simon, but the reason is that's relevant is because he's going to be in a coma for all this time. Which is why I started to think about coma. Like, if Paul Simon's going to fall now, is he going to be in a vegetative state until the Thanksgiving date that I already knew that God was pointing to? And sure enough, it's all now proven. Okay. The turkey doesn't fit through the door because it symbolizes those who took the mark. They don't fit through the door to heaven. In my Father's house are many mansions. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Quote from the Bible. The term mark is also slang for a gullible, foolish person, particularly used in African American slang. I remember they say it a lot in the movie Boys in the Hood. Mark equals turkey. Okay, also, the door would symbolize the demon's passage into the people's brains for demonic possession, coma, vegetative state symbolism. Paul Simon made a guest appearance on the Beach Boys song Vegetables. Actually, it wasn't. It was Paul McCartney, but it's still relevant, what I'm saying right now. During a 1967 trip to the United States, Paul McCartney visited the studio where Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys were recording tracks for their upcoming album, Smiley Smile. The song, which was written by Brian Wilson and Van Dyke Parks, celebrated healthy eating and required unique percussion tracks. Okay, Simon was invited into the vocal booth to provide Foley-style percussion. He joined McCartney, I should say. He joined in the background and can be heard loudly chewing and chomping on fresh, crunchy vegetables, reportedly celery and carrots, to form the rhythmic percussion for the song. Lorne Michaels equals Angel Michael, Archangel Michael, and the Dragon in 42 months. Graceland was the release of it was 42 months before Terry Schiavo's vegetative state. Okay. By the way, Brian Wilson, Good Vibrations, which is what's hinted, which hints at the brain. Brian Wilson died because of his brain dementia, and it's all pointing to the demonic possession through people's brains and the frequencies, good vibrations. Okay. Now, ignore the beast. Don't ignore it, because Paul McCartney is the same as Paul Simon, as I will explain. I was just going to type that. I found this too. It's still interesting though. Paul and Paul. Okay. So Paul McCartney called Paul Simon on his birthday on October 13th, 1990, while on a TV show while he was in the UK, Paul Simon. It was his 49th birthday. Okay. So Paul McCartney sings on the date 4-1, right? When he sang at the Apple campus, like I explained earlier, on the anniversary of Apple, and he founded the other Apple Corps, and they had a lawsuit with each other before. And Simon, which is the irony, and Simon was born in the year 41, and Paul called Paul on the 7x7th birthday, okay, and the song Homeward Bound came up because Paul Simon composed it while in the UK at a train station in the UK. Paul McCartney, The Beatles, Vegetables, a song, okay? Brian Wilson, Good Vibrations, died on June 11th, 410 days before July 26th. That's why it's all relevant. So the Paul and Paul connection here gets us Brian Wilson's death to Paul Simon's predicted fall and head injury. Again, Brian Wilson died from his head brain condition, and he made the song Good Vibrations, which hints at the coming demonic possession of people's brains after they take the mark of the Antichrist. And Paul Simon at the White House with Biden, with his brain injury and him being the mark of the Antichrist vaccine guy, and the Japan Prime Minister, which through Japanimation hints at demonic possession, because Japanimation is obsessed with spiritual possession, and he sang at Graceland. In other words, the Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar, demonic possession, and that was on the date 410, which is a second witness to the 410 days connection to July 26th. And I already explained how Simon's performance connected to Simon's predicted fall. Again, it was 9 months and 11 days to the inauguration of Trump, and then another 9 months and 11 days to the bathrooms, and then the 268 days, as I explained earlier. The name Schiavo supposedly means slave, or hints at slave. Terry, tear in the Bible, the separation of the wheat from the tares. Now, July 26th is 851 days, which is the 257th semi-prime number, and that hints at Mr. Irrelevant to Paul to his predicted death. Okay, as I explained, Terry Schiavo was born 851 days after Barack Obama. That's a second witness, and Barack Obama is the Mr. Irrelevant. All right, as I explained. Her maiden name was Schindler, as in Schindler's List, directed by Steven Spielberg. And July 26th will be 36 days after the release of Disclosure Day, Steven Spielberg's fourth Aliens album. DD gives us 4 and 4. Okay, now, Simon's predicted death on Thanksgiving will be 4 times 4 days after the predicted election of the Obamas, which will bring the 44th president back to the White House. The 4 times 4th president started the tradition of having Thanksgiving on the 4th Sunday of the 11th month. Oh, you know what? That's why Obama was elected on, that's why Obama was elected on the 11th day of the 4th month. The 4th day of the 11th month. November 4th. And why the Iran hostage crisis began on the date 11/4. It symbolizes America. As does Paul Simon with his song America, an American tune, who will die on Thanksgiving, the 4th Sunday of the 11th month. Fantastic. Amazing. Not only does 4 times 11 hint at 44 and the 44th president, but we have symbolic meaning now. because it symbolizes America. The fourth Sunday of the 11th month, Thanksgiving. The one holiday that separates America from the rest of the world, the most special holiday, the day when Americans thank God for their blessings and being Americans. Amazing. Which is a blessing. Thanksgiving will be 4 times 4 days after the election. I just said that, okay. 415 is the 266th super composite number. All right. Now, it's 415 months between Terry Schiavo's cardiac arrest and going into a coma to September 25th, when the mayor was indicted just hours after Paul Simon's concert in New York City. Okay, I'm attempting to figure out how to connect June 25th with Terry Schiavo, as it's 882 days before the predicted death of Paul Simon. We already did that. I already did it, but there's more to it. Okay, this is an amazing thing here. So we were talking at the beginning of this video about the Turkey USA game on June 25th, right? And how it connects to Paul Simon. And now we have this number of days that hints at Terry Schiavo, because her name equals 882 in English gematria. So what's really going on here? There's more to this, okay? This is amazing. The controversy was about whether to remove her artificial nutrition and hydration. What we have here are the signs the day before and the day after the June 25th that involve hydration. Because the day before, Lionel Richie was ill and had to get off stage because of dehydration. According to the drummer of Earth, Wind, and Fire, the missing element is water. And on the same day as, and Harry Styles choked the day after when he was choking on water. And he was blowing water in One Direction, and he's from the band One Direction. These two signs are likely bookends to June 25th, okay, which was this day that connects with the Terry Schiavo number of days to Paul Simon's predicted death. Okay, but there's more. Also, on June 25th was the 7th semi-prime number of months after June 25th, as I explained, and the indictment of Mayor Adams as an Adams family mansion, and the issue was over the Turkish embassy, as in Turkey Day, that led to the raid of the Gracie Mansion, as in Graceland Mansion, the following day. Paul Simon, whose 7th solo album is Graceland, performed in New York City hours before, and on the 25th was Jimmy Fallon led a tour of his haunted mansion in New York City with Prince, as in the King, Harry, who actually visited the King's mansion in Graceland, and People.com published an interview with Elvis's granddaughter, who starred in movies about mansions, haunted mansions as in demonic possession, and recently completed her mother's memoir about Graceland. All right. Now, so that's all amazing, by the way. Given that 9/25 in 2024 and June 25th in 2026 are 25 months apart, it makes sense that, are the 25th of the month, I should say, it makes sense that February 25th, 1990 would connect somehow. How about this? Okay. So, like I'm getting at, okay, now this is the part that I was promising would be amazing here. Okay, I think. No, it's coming up. Don't worry. Stay tuned. June 25th, 2025 is the middle date between the two hydration signs. June 25th was the World Cup Turkey USA game, but how was it prophetic besides it being Turkey and connecting with 882 days to the Turkey Day? Prior to this was June 24th and the Lionel Richie dehydration sign. Okay, and in the St. Paul, the 32nd state, which is 32 days before July 26th, and Paul Simon's predicted fall. The day after the game, on June 25th, was Harry Styles' One Direction fall on stage, and it was also about hydration, and it was during the heat wave and Earth, Wind, and Fire, and you got it, okay. So this is 3 dates in total, and it was 2 dates out of the 3, which are the hydration signs, and the score in the game was 3-2, and this was how the game was prophetic. The score hints at 3-2, and the 3 dates point to the 2 dates that were on either side of it, the hydration signs. Okay, let's just move on. The 2 goals for the USA were scored by number 6 and number 14. 614 is the 188th semi-prime number. H108 in the Hebrew Concordance is the word for woe, ! Used in the Bible in the context of extreme judgment from God. The hydration signs point to Terry Schiavo and confirm the 882 days to Thanksgiving Day and the predicted removal of Paul Simon's artificial nutrition and hydration. All right? But there's more. Here it is, finally. Okay, aha, exclamation marks. Here we go. Remember at the beginning I talked about Paris Hilton and it connected to Lionel Richie because of Nicole Richie and all that? She opened the game, like I said earlier, with the game ball, right? Well, how is this important? This is huge. USA scored 2 goals, and it was exactly 2 months after the assassination attempt of Trump at the Hilton Hotel. Of course, Paris Hilton is an heiress to the Hilton hotel empire. Now, the goals were scored by number 6 and number 14, and Trump was born on the date 6/14. And of course, Trump was attempted to be assassinated at the Hilton Hotel. The shooter incident was sudden, right? It was sudden and unexpected. I mean, that was the big thing, right? The video of it is like he's just appeared out of nowhere in the video and just like dashed through the security. It was like sudden, okay? He suddenly bolted through the security and fell and was arrested, which hinted at the sudden cardiac arrest of Terry Schiavo. March 25th, 26, the date of the Hilton Hotel and Trump and the shooter, was 62 times 7 months exactly after Terry Schiavo, and we explained the relevance of that. The shooter was from Los Angeles area, and the game was in Los Angeles area. Okay, that's the thing. The shooter was from Los Angeles, and exactly 2 months later was the game in the Los Angeles area. And like the shooter, Simon will unexpectedly suddenly fall. The shooter fell. He was taken to the ground. The big thing, if we all remember, is him falling to the ground. Well, not really. We have the shot of him being chased, and then we have an image of him like on the ground. So he was tackled onto the ground, right? He fell. Now, in the book of Daniel, it is 62 sevens and 7 sevens. Okay, from Terry Schiavo, it's 62 times 7 months to April 25th, and then September 25th, 2025 is the 7th semi-prime number of months before June 25th. Here we go. Okay, I thought I was going to get to it in that paragraph, but we didn't get to it yet. Okay, Paris Hilton. Here we go. Here is the big thing here. Paris Hilton served time in jail for a DUI. Okay? If you know the story of Paris Hilton, one of the famous American celebrities, a big part of her story back in the day, she was famous for going to jail, okay, for a DUI. Out of fear of using, and she's this princess, right? This is the irony. This is why it's so interesting. This spoiled, rich Paris Hilton went to jail. And lo and behold, what happened? Out of fear of using the facilities, she refused to eat or drink and suffered acute dehydration, for which she required medical treatment. She was sentenced on May 4th, 2007, exactly 45 years and 9 months before the birth of Obama. 45 is the 9th triangular number. Obama was inaugurated in 2009. Number 9 symbolizes judgment. But anyway, Obama is equal to 32 in simple English gematria. And the score in the game in which Paris Hilton gave out the ceremonial ball at the beginning was 3-2. Her sentence was 45 days, and 45 is the 9th triangular number. She ended up serving 23 days, and 23 is the 9th prime number. 23 is also Obama's number because he wore number 23, and he was inaugurated in 2009. Her sentencing date, May 4th, in Los Angeles, was exactly 999 weeks. Okay, we have the 9s in her sentence and her time served, right? 45 years, 9 months to Obama's birth. She was sentenced to 45 days, 9th triangular number. She served 23 days, 9th prime number. She was sentenced in Los Angeles exactly 999 weeks before she initiated the game in Los Angeles. And God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. That's amazing. Terry Schiavo was in a vegetative state in the 9 plus 9 plus 9th state. And she died in the 9+9+9th state. And the big controversy was about Florida, because Florida law and Florida Constitution were the central pillars of the Terry Schiavo case. The legal battles hinged heavily on state statutes regarding guardianship, the right to privacy, and the separation of powers. The entire case revolved around several specific aspects of Florida law, the 9+9+9th state. Paris Hilton was released from jail in Los Angeles after serving 23 days out of her 45-day sentence, which gives us the number 9, exactly the 4 plus 4th prime number of years before she threw out the game ball in Los Angeles. So we connected the date of her sentencing. Now we're connecting the date that she was released from jail. Both of these dates connect. Because God pairs 9 and 44 together because this is what confirms the signs and connections, as I explained earlier. God pairs 9, 23, and 44. The 44th president was inaugurated in 09, and he wore the number 23 jersey in high school. So she came out of jail after 23 days, out of her 45-day sentence, by the way, which hints at number 9 because of the 9th triangular number and the 9th prime number. And it was exactly 4 plus 4 years. Prime number of years. In other words, 19 years. 4th plus 4th prime number of years. 44th president before she threw out the game ball. A pairing of 9, 23, and 44 equals Obama, equals 32, and the score was 3-2. She was released from jail on June 26th, 2007. And it's 19 years, one day, as in 9/11, which is associated with Paul Simon, before Simon is predicted to fall and go into a vegetative state with artificial nutrition and hydration, which is what Paris Hilton had to receive because she was afraid to use the toilet in the jail. She had to receive artificial nutrition and hydration. This is why Paris Hilton put out the ball at the beginning of the Turkey-USA game, which connects America, USA, and Paul Simon symbolizes America with his song America, an American tune, to his predicted death on Turkey Day. Yeah. 4 times 4 days after the election of Obama, whose number is 32, and the score was 3-2. And he's the 44th president. All right. Now, 32 equals Obama. Terry Schiavo equals 882. Obama is a turkey. 882 days after the 3-2 game against Turkey is Turkey Day, which is food, feast, and the predicted removal of Paul Simon's artificial nutrition and hydration, starvation. That's the irony here. He will be, basically starving, but will die on Turkey Day, which is the feast day. His food will be removed on the feast day, which, by the way, is hinting at the coming rationing of food in America and starvation, which will be used to enforce the mark of the Antichrist by Barack Obama. Paris Hilton opened the game in which the USA scored 2 goals. She got her start as a celebrity with a TV show about her and her friend, 2 girlfriends. They were a duo. Her friend in the show, Nicole Richie, is the daughter of Lionel Richie. Lionel Richie fell due to dehydration the day before the game, and that was started by Paris Hilton, in which the USA scored 2 goals, which was exactly 2 months after the attempt to shoot Trump at the Hilton Hotel. The game in Los Angeles was in between 2 hydration signs on 2 different stages. On the day of the assassination attempt of Trump at the Hilton Hotel, the Stagecoach Music Festival in Los Angeles was closed due to high wind. The drummer for Earth, Wind, and Fire, as in water, said that Lionel Richie suffered from dehydration on the stage, as in the Stagecoach Music Festival. Lionel Richie was performing with Earth, Wind, and Fire on the stage in the 32nd state. The score in the game was 3-2. Lionel Richie was ill due to dehydration 32 days before it is predicted that Paul Simon will fall and hit his head and then will be put into a vegetative state in which he will be provided artificial nutrition and hydration. 32 equals Obama. Simon's predicted fall on July 26th will be 851 days before it is predicted that its artificial nutrition and hydration will be removed. Obama was born 851 days before Terry Schiavo was born. Amazing. Schiavo was born in the second state. Hilton threw out the game ball when the USA scored 2 goals exactly 2 months after the assassination of Trump in the Hilton Hotel. USA played Turkey. Terry Schiavo equals 882. The game between USA and Turkey is 882 days before Turkey Day and the predicted removal of Simon's artificial nutrition and hydration, just like Terry Schiavo. Amazing. June 25th really does connect to Terry Schiavo. Paris Hilton was a duo with Nicole Richie. Paul Simon was a duo with Art Garfunkel. Lionel Richie was with a famous band, the Commodores, which is hinting at ships. Harry Styles was with a famous band, One Direction. Exactly 2 months after the attempted assassination of Trump at the Hilton Hotel, Paris Hilton is in the duo of The Simple Life, opened the game, and USA scored 2 goals. The goals were scored by players number 6 and 14, and Trump was born on the date 6/14. The day after the game, Trump was back at the Hilton in D.C. for the Christian conference in which he spoke about the coming genocide of Christians in America. The coming genocide will involve the restriction of buying and selling food. The Terry Schiavo controversy was about restricting her artificial nutrition and hydration. She was in jail. When she was in jail, Paris Hilton restricted her intake of food and water, and she required artificial hydration. Like I'm saying, this is Bible prophecy, the restriction of buying and selling food. This is all what's being pointed to through all of this as well. The feast, Turkey Day, etc. The artificial nutrition and hydration. Trump was born on June 14th, 6/14. The players who scored in the game on June 25th were 6 and 14. 614 is the 188th semi-prime number, which equals 188 exclamation mark in the Bible, which is in the context of extreme judgment from God. Players number 6 and 14 scored against Turkey on June 25th, exactly 882 days, which equals Terry Schiavo, before Turkey Day, as in food feast, on 11/23, the date, and 1123 is the 188th prime number. Again, which points to H188, whoa, exclamation mark, used in the Bible of extreme judgment from God. And that is the end of this video. And sorry I had to speed through things at the end. If you want, it's the information is so profound and it's such rapid fire. It would make sense in my mind, if you love this stuff because you love God and his signs, to watch it again. You know, and maybe pause it every now and absorb it as you go. Because I just went through a lot of really profound stuff there. God bless. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.